Anyway, well, let's jump in to some amazing pictures that I want you to take a look at. So, Larry, open up photo one. And for all the listeners, my wonderful editor will make sure that you're seeing the photo as we speak about them. And so this photo I took from MLB Central. I had to take this photo. They were doing a story on something, I forget what, and this was the photo they had up of Giolito and Bieber. And I took this photo because when you do the work that I do, this is an eye candy photo in terms of something in the motion. And just as all you guys, when you see a perfect swing from a hitter, you're like, whoa, that is gorgeous. Well, they're doing something here that is so important. And to me, I realized the reason why I jumped up and took this photo and was so excited about it is that when a pitcher calls me, and in the last few weeks, I have had more calls from pitchers than I have ever had since the podcast has started. And by the way, I love those calls. Pitchers calling me with sore elbows, sore arms, sore this, sore that. And when some of them send me videos and I take a look, I realize that one of the first places I look is where is the pitcher's arm and how does he look at this point in the motion? And this so connects to what we talked about the last time. And also I realized this is an actual self-defining moment. It's actually a moment where when you look to see what's happening here, you actually then can go to the next movement and see exactly why a pitcher may or may not be throwing as hard as he could or may not be locating at all because his arm doesn't come through correctly. And the error for those things actually happens right at this moment. Now, I always want to preface when I'm talking about pitching mechanics, I always want to preface it with this statement. I remind everybody that I am the English teacher that teaches you how to diagram and the actual perfect grammar, when to put in a comma. I'm that when it comes to the pitching motion. I understand that we've got great pitchers out there that do not always do what sports scientists think is actually the most efficient way to do it. We base our feedback and our opinions on the science of the way the joints work and the science of what we know are the muscles that produce certain movements and an analysis of what is being done, what's correct, etc. when it comes to velocity, when it comes to injury prevention. So we put all that together in a big bowl, we mix it up, and then we have this information that's sound and it's efficient. And pitchers sometimes practice something incorrectly and they become great at it. So I don't want everyone to think, oh, because someone's not doing this, well, this can't be right because so-and-so's good and he doesn't do it. That's probably a better way to say it. This cannot be the correct information because so-and-so doesn't do that and look how good he is. Well, when I see a pitcher who's doing something that's not really efficient, I either know he's going to get injured or he may reach a ceiling on his velocity particularly. So because someone's good at it doesn't make this kind of information wrong. But I can tell you as coaches, when you're teaching, you want to teach closely, as close to the efficient way to do it. And it may not even be the way you did it when you were playing. But if you're a coach, you want to always embrace what the ideal is. And especially if your pitcher runs into trouble. So the guy who's driving down the street crazy and he gets home safe all the time, okay, he can keep doing that. But I guarantee if he gets in an accident or he gets put in jail, he's going to want to learn how to do it right. So once a pitcher has trouble, and the pitchers that call me, they're in trouble. They want to know, why is this happening? Why isn't it? So, and normally this is a place where I will see inefficiency. So let's go over this photo. And I want to really jump in and teach you how to look at this position of your pitcher. Now, if you remember last week, I said when we were talking about what do you do in season, one of the easiest things for a coach to do is to stand behind the catcher and look at what does the pitcher look like just as he's about to throw the ball. And by the way, I've got some photos that are going to elicit some of the things I'm talking about, but I want to stay with this photo now. And I want to remind you of what I said last week. You stand behind the catcher. The pitcher's ready to throw the ball, or his body is ready to throw the ball, which means now you're going to be looking at a guy who, as I say all the time, if he had jeans on the pelvis, you would see his two pockets facing you. You would move up to the name on the shirt, baseball name on the shirt. It's facing you. You're looking at both his shoulders as if they're the two tires of your car, and they're both lined up in alignment to go straight. And the arm is in what we call max external rotation. If you have a pitcher whose shoulders are squared up, but his chest is facing, third baseline for let's see, that would be a righty, and then a lefty first baseline. Did I say that right, Larry?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that I got that. Yeah, I'm not oriented on the field
Right,
all the time.
right.
I'm in a bullpen, so I have to actually think about that. But anyway, so if you're seeing something off there, then his timing was off, and something's not going to be as good as it could be. And it can be the explanation to you as to why something's going wrong. Now, let's take a look at this photo. So this is the position prior to being squared up. And that's why I loved this so much, because here's what you're seeing. First of all, you can infer by looking at their bodies, you can see, especially on Bieber, because it's a little better shot, you can see that his belt buckle is in fact facing the plate. So his lower body is square. On Giolito, he is actually square too, but on this photo, it doesn't show it as well. But you can see something very important. Their lower body rotated to square towards the plate before their arm came through. In fact, their arm isn't even ready to come through yet. So in rotation is what you use to go from the sideways position to being squared up to face the target. It's also the way that you develop the angular velocity that is transferred into the upper body, which brings the arm through. And the way the rotation is efficient is that it starts at the pelvis, which would be the belt line down, and then into the trunk, and that would be the probably from, let's say, the name down, the part where we think our stomach is. And then the third part is the upper body rotation. And what you're seeing here in this photo is that the pelvis, the lower hips, they arrived first. You're seeing the trunk musculature, and on Giolito, you can see this because he's in stripes, and you can see that he is not fully, his arm is back. His trunk has not fully rotated square. And you can really see it on Bieber because he's got Cleveland, and you can see that that baseball name has not squared up yet. But the salient thing about this is that the arm is behind the upper trunk, and we'll call the upper trunk where the baseball name is, and it's behind the lower trunk, and it's behind the hips, and that's what you want. Now, so far, Larry, are you with me?
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay. Now, why do we love this? Why is it that we want this? So, okay, let's jump and cut to the chase about pitching. Pitching is accelerating the ball. And the ball, as you know, is before it's thrown by the pitcher and he's ready to throw, the ball is behind the pitcher. So he's got a stretch around the shoulder. We want a stretch around the shoulder. Why do we want that? And when I say the shoulder, I should say shoulder joint. The shoulder joint, when it's okay on these guys, they're righty. So we're going to talk about that right tire. We want that squared up. So we want it in position, but we don't want it just facing the hitter, just like right now, the way you're sitting. You're probably squared up to something. But the deal is, if you're not pre-stretching the shoulder, if you were going to be doing something with acceleration, you would want your shoulder stretched. This is muscle mechanics. If you want a muscle to accelerate, which you want the shoulder joint muscles to accelerate, you want to pre-stretch them. And that stretching begins from the moment the pitcher starts to rotate. As he rotates towards the plate with his body, his arm is actually rotating in an opposite direction. So now he's coming through, and what you see on both of them is because the arm is behind the body, they actually are pre-stretching the shoulder. Now, if you look at their upper arm, and when I say upper arm, you can go from, like, look at Giolito's uniform. So where the vertical stripes end at the shoulder joint, you'll see horizontal stripes leading to his elbow. That's the humerus. That's the upper arm. Notice on both of them that they're at a perfect 90-degree angle. Now, why do we like 90? Because that shoulder bone, that place where the vertical and the horizontal stripes meet on Giolito's uniform, that joint is the fastest moving joint when it's moving in internal rotation, which is acceleration, and it rotates perfectly, quickly, and fast if it's sitting right in the socket. And that's exactly what a 90-degree angle at that point gives you. So what you're seeing here is a stretch in all the front of the shoulder muscles. That's defined by the fact, you can see it, that the lines, the horizontal line of the shoulder to the elbow is behind the body. So the body's leading the way, and it's actually turning towards the plate as the arm is staying back, and that's how you get the acceleration. Now, the beauty of this picture is it shows the perfect forearm angle. And if you notice, they're both slightly different. But there's a short range where you can be a little bit this way or a little bit that way. But here's what this photo is showing you. You've got a little bit of rotation left in the trunk. So if you look at, I think it's probably easier to see with Bieber right now. He's got rotation left in his upper trunk. He's got to square up a little more. And his arm is behind that trunk. And his job, and the way it's done anatomically, is now his upper trunk musculature is going to continue. Remember, he's in the process of rotation here. It's going to continue to square up. Now, to the degree that it needs to square up, which is, you can call it an inch. Let's call it an inch, okay? Let's say he's got an inch to square up on his rotation. Look at his elbow. He's got an inch to move the forearm out to form that perfect L position that we love to see. And he, of course, will rotate through that and then accelerate the ball. And because you're seeing a perfect proportion of rotation that's needed for squaring up in his body, compared and consistent with the amount of extension he needs to get the forearm into position, what you're going to have on both these guys is you're going to have the next move, and I'm going to be showing this to you, not with them, but with some other photos. The next move is, just picture this. As he squares up, the forearm moves into the L position, and just as he's doing that, he happens to be perfectly squared up to the hitter. The ball's perfectly behind him, and now he can use his shoulder to go forward because now he's got the tire lined up to go straight. And all this happens simultaneously. So just picture this. Picture the arm is going to extend at the elbow, meaning the forearm will move into a perfect L position as the body's turning, and all that then passes him through that perfect place where he's facing. He lets the ball go, and now he's got velocity because he used his shoulder joint. He used the shoulder joint that had elasticity and pre-stretch through the whole part of the release. And the other thing is, because he's using his trunk to lead the way, the trunk brings the arm, not the arm brings the arm. And when you've got the trunk position, which doesn't have a lot of wobble to it, delivering the ball, you're going to get consistency in addition to the fact you used all the muscles around the shoulder in a pre-stretch position. And that is why when I look at this, I go, wow. So far, Larry, Are you with me?
Absolutely. The what sticks out to me is to get where they are requires like their timing's got to be great. They're in a great position when their front foot first strikes the ground, their arms up, their hands above their elbow. They're in a good position. Because if they're not there, then they're not going to be where we see them in the photos. Correct?
Right, right. So when you're troubleshooting, when you've got a pitcher, and let's say you're working with him and you're trying to get him better, you have to look at this right here. The elbow right there, the elbow joint. And I like Bieber's a little better because it looks like there's a little more activity, but Giolito has better external rotation. So, first of all, what the shoulder's doing right now is it's still going into external rotation. And Giolito has more external rotation, meaning when you look at the forearm, the underside of it, part that's facing the ground, you know that when Giolito makes his next turn, boom, that forearm's going to be parallel to the ground. When Bieber does it, he's going to have that too because he's that good. The shoulder is in the process of external rotation. So here's what we've got left. We've got rotating to the plate, shoulder is still stretching, the elbow's moving to get the ball in line with what has to be in line to throw the ball. Remember, you've got to throw the ball from behind in a perfect line to where you're going to release the ball. If you don't do that, you're not going to be locating. So you have to be facing the plate, which is what I talked about last week. Everything's got to face the plate. So right now they're doing everything to prepare. So when the ball's ready, they're ready. If the body hasn't turned or the elbows in front of the body, and this is a critical thing to look at, and I will again be showing you some photos to help you with this, but that is why this is so perfect. There's a lot going on here. Now, to handle this, and yes, if you don't have this, you do have to go to the beginning of the motion, because if you've learned anything, I hope, from listening to me, it's when you see a flaw, the flaw is a result of something that happened prior to that. So when you see a guy leading with the elbow, you're going to not see this position on him. Or you will see this position on him, but his hip hasn't turned all the way. Or you will see this, and then instead of him rotating his trunk, he leaves the trunk right where it's at, and then he brings the arm. So if you've got a guy who looks like this in the body, the name on the shirt isn't quite square, but you see his arm is ready to throw. He didn't rotate into position to deliver the ball. He rotated partially and then brought his shoulder and arm into position to throw, meaning he lost his stretch. Number one reason for lack of velocity. And because of that, he actually has crazy stuff going on with his hand position. And you might have pitchers with their fingers on the side of the ball when they should be behind it. So, absolutely, timing and or not being aware of how to move all the parts. Some kids, when you look at youth pitchers, they want to throw the ball really quickly. So they're thinking, come out of the glove and throw. So as they're turning, they're thinking to get the hand out. If you notice, these guys aren't thinking, oh, I can't, I got to get my hand out. These guys are thinking, I got to get my body squared up and keep that ball away for as long as I can, and then I can fire it. So far, does this all make sense, Larry?
Right. Oh, no, perfect
Yeah.
sense.
Now, the
Yes.
way that you accomplish this position, guys, so when you're, and I'm going to give some exercises, but what you're seeing here physically is you're seeing shoulder blades that are still retracted. So if you're just sitting there and you squeeze both of your blades together, that's called retraction. And retraction is something they notice in pitchers that throw 95 and above. The shoulder blades are retracted for longer. Now, the opposite of retraction is protraction. So if you've ever thrown a punch, or if you just now take your arm and go like a punch, you'll see the shoulder blade pull out. It pulls away from the spine. That's called protraction. And the main protractor is a muscle called the serratus. It works along with the chest. And it actually is one of the main contributors to velocity that no one talks about. So again, when you're retracted, It's allowing you to keep the shoulder from starting to lead, meaning the arm. It's also pre-stretching the protractor, just like it's pre-stretching the chest. And it's also pre-stretching the lat in a specific plane that the lat works in. So I know that's hard to see because the lat's in the back of the body, but it wraps around to the front and it acts as an internal rotator. So what you're seeing on these guys is a chest that's pre-stretched, a serratus that's pre-stretched, a lat that's pre-stretched, and that's happening because he's contracted between the shoulder blades. Pitchers that let go of that retraction as they're turning will have an arm that breaks free from the chest. See, right here, it kind of looks like one piece. Do you see what I mean, Larry? The trunk is it's like the arm fits into the trunk and they're just turning the trunk and they're not moving the arm. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
If you let go of your blades, I mean, everyone, when you're done with this podcast, get in the mirror, put this photo up and try to get in this shape and get in that shape. And then don't move anything except bring your blade out, try to move your blade. And what you're going to see is you completely lost the stretch and that arm's going to get there too soon, not giving the body enough time. The body delivers the arm. When I started working with baseball pitching, I would hear coaches say, the arm's like a whip, the arm's like a whip. And I'm like, as a kinesiologist, I'm going, I don't get it. I don't get what they're saying. Well, what they're saying is on a pitch where it's done correctly, it's as if the arm comes through without you doing anything. And that is what happens when you're holding everything back and it's go time. So go time is something that occurs because your body puts yourself in a position to do nothing else but go. But if you don't use the body correctly, meaning the rotation and meaning keeping the arm back, then you're going to be into having to use the arm. And that's when you cannot achieve velocity. That's why I always say, when you're trying to get more velocity, before you start thinking you've got to do exotic things, make sure you're using the tool that you have, which is a shoulder that can produce major, major miles per hour. So let's open up the next photo where we're going to go. Now, just this is a reminder. This is where you're trying to get. So what this is a perfect max external rotation position. He's at 90 degrees between his trunk and his arm, and he's at 90 degrees. Now, there is wobble to how open that elbow is, but he's passing through this position to deliver the ball. So, yes, there's wobble. The arm can be a little more open. We don't really want it too more closed, and I'll tell you why in a second. But remember, where the position that you saw Bieber and Giolito in, the next position is this. And you can tell that he's pre-stretched in front of the shoulder. Now, for you guys, you coaches, get behind the rubber. And what you're seeing here from this view is you're seeing, if you look at his left shoulder, and you can draw a straight line right over to the elbow, you can see that there's a straight line there. In fact, you can see his shirt is hanging on his body perfectly straight, the sleeve. If he were leading with the elbow, you would see that upper arm angling towards the fence and the outfield there. You would see it going forward, not straight across. So from the front, he's going to be straight across. Now, because he's in this position, he's still got his stretch. And of course, he's not stopping here. He's moving through it. He has lined himself up so that the shoulder can go forward. So everything about the pitching motion has to get you to here. And then here is where acceleration starts. Acceleration into ball release starts here. So your motion has to get you here. So just look from the ground up. You see 2 feet that look pretty stable. You can tell he's squared up. And you can tell his chest is forward. And he went through exactly what you saw Giolito and Bieber doing. And their next move would have them totally squared up with a stretch in their shoulder. And this is why these guys are so good and consistent. And that's the main thing. So far, so good, Larry?
Yeah, consistency is huge. I mean,
Yes.
That's the name of the game.
Yeah. So, consistency, the bigger the muscles, the more they go where you want them to go all the time consistently. Our arms are designed, your shoulder has what we call in kinesiology 3 degrees of freedom. It can go in all these different planes of motion, unlike your, let's say, refrigerator door, which has one plane of motion. It doesn't move up and down, it moves in and out, in and out. You can't make it do anything else. Where all joints have certain degrees of freedom, and the shoulder has ton, meaning the arm moving in through the shoulder joint. If you deliver or try to be consistent with an arm, like if you just wave your arm can move without your trunk changing at all. You can lift your arm and just whip it around in space. That kind of wobble that it has is why we want to keep it attached till the very last second to the trunk, which is changing its position in space. And as it changes, it can be extremely consistent because it's this one big block of muscles. And so when you're dealing with the pitching motion, you want the pitcher to feel his arm is kind of connected into that. So when he makes the turn, he's not starting to flail. You don't want that arm to be doing anything but rotating backward as the body is rotating forward. That's how you get consistency. And consistency is how you get your favorite word, Larry, getting outs.
Outs are good.
Oh,
Outs are
yeah.
very good.
Okay. Outs are good. Okay. Now I want you to open up the next photo. So here is how it looks from the side. So this is one of my pictures, and I love this photo because it demonstrates perfectly what we just talked about. So if you notice in the photo on the left, you're seeing him in a position that looks like the one you just saw with Giolito. If you look at the name on his shirt on the left and look at it on the right, you'll see that the name isn't quite square. He's got his hips square, but his upper trunk isn't square, and he's just coming into max external rotation. And the next photo, it shows that he's in max external rotation, and now the ball's ready to go. And this is a sample of how when you look from the side. Now, here's what you want to look for. So from the side, it's easy to see on the left photo that he has gotten his arms behind his body. It's easy to see that. And this guy happens to have great separation of rotation. But on the third one, on the photo on the right, what I want you to see is that you can see his face. You can see his arm. You can still see the stretch. Now, he has not fired that ball yet. And so he is just arriving with all that stretch. So now he's able with his shoulder to go forward in the motion and deliver the ball with at least the maximum acceleration that he has at this time of his life and his career, because he has pre-stretched his shoulder to the max. So unless he makes some error in his delivery forward, he's going to have the best possibility for efficiency of location. So when you get to the side of your pitcher as you're watching him or taking photos, can you see him? If he was leading with the elbow, you wouldn't be able to see his face at all. And leading with the elbow is a matter of losing the stretch, and it usually happens for a number of other reasons and errors in the motion. But what you're not going to see is this very classic position of the shoulder at max external rotation from the side. So this is what you want to look for. So this is why in season you're able to take a look from the side view to see exactly how your pitcher looks, and it gives you some idea of how he's operating with his rotation and with his shoulder muscles. Okay, so now let's open the next photo. And now I want to get into giving you some ways to teach the pitcher. Pitchers are very kinesthetic. They have feel. You always, when you're trying, if you see a flaw and you see he's losing a feel, you always want to give him feel that has nothing to do with having a ball in his hand and a glove, and possibly if he's laying down, it's even better. So this happens to be a left-handed pitcher. He's actually is doing an exercise. So you've seen this before. I've talked about this before. It's a rotation exercise. but I wanted you to see this still shot. So the way the exercise is done is he starts with his legs vertical, and he brings him to the right side. Then he goes to the left. His feet are not on the ground here. Then he'll bring him back up to the center. He'll go to the other side. But the reason why I want you to look at it, and in fact, you don't even have to have them do the exercise, have them just get into this position. So when he's laying, both his arms, and he's a lefty, so I have him rotating to his right. So you'll see that his arms are flat. You'll see that he brought his legs over, so his hips are square. His hips are totally square. And I want you to look at his shirt. See the wrinkles on his shirt? The wrinkles on his shirt show you that he is rotated and pulled towards his left arm. That's because he hasn't given up that left side yet. And that is exactly what pitching is. Don't give up the left side for a lefty until your right side has made its turn, and then all the bottom parts have made their turn. The last thing you do is give up this arm. So this is called, golfers use this exercise. It's called the X factor. In kinesiology, we have that little nickname for it, where it teaches an athlete who has rotation in as part of his skill, which would be hitting, it would be golfing, it probably would be not maybe some tennis, but definitely golf, hitting, and pitching, which are very similar. They all need to have separation of rotation. So what you're seeing, what you're teaching the pitcher to feel here is how all his body weight is square, trying to square up. And right now his left shoulder is being completely stretched. And by the way, his left shoulder would be completely retracted in the back, the shoulder blade. And so this gives the pitcher feel. And having him do the exercise itself, moving side to side, helps them actually really feel the moments when one part goes, the next part goes. But his shirt showing the wrinkles is an exact display of how things are being pulled. So this is something that gives the pitcher feel. Okay, then the next thing you want to do, and let's open up the next photo, which I think the last photo, is now my favorite drill, but you're going to use this differently now. So everyone knows, if you've been listening to me, I love this drill for so many reasons, because it takes away all the places where pitchers get themselves crazy, like with the knee lift and the stepping out and the stride. So this just puts them in this landing position. And in this position here, you start to rotate with the pelvis going first, his white part of his shirt, the lower part would go second, and then the arms would come through. And we would want to see what we saw in Bieber and Giolito converting into what we saw with my other pitcher on the video from the side. So here are the words. The pelvis is going to go first, then you're going to get the shoulders, and the shoulder is going backwards as the hips go forward. So here's a great way to teach. You put your pitcher in this position. He's not going to be throwing. You put your arm and your hands on his arm, and you tell him all you want him to do is to do the lower body rotation. So he's going to then start turning on his back foot so that right hip starts to square up. As he's doing that, and it's simultaneous, I want you to, and do it gently. You're not pushing hard. You are pushing his forearm backward as he's squaring up into external rotation. As he's squaring up into external rotation, and as he's rotating, you are controlling the rotation of his arm. And that's how he feels and sees how it stays behind the body. And also it has the exact right angle. So this is the way you use this here to teach him that the body goes first and the arm is moving at the same time, but it's moving into external rotation, not trying to come forward to throw. The other thing that is a great way to teach is, in fact, I did this over the phone with one of my long distance pitchers. So I sent him the photo of Giolito and Bieber, and I said this to him. And he's worked with me for a while, so he knows how I teach. And I said, I want you to go in the mirror, and I want you to get into this exact position, the exact position of the arm, the elbow angle, everything. Get in that position. And then I want you to make one move to where as the upper body turns, your arm comes out. So all he's doing is going to get that finishing move that you saw when you looked at Preston, my picture in the video where we were looking from the side. You saw that last movement from the picture of Bieber into that squared up position that you saw from the two photos of Preston. So you use that as a drill. He goes from that to square, and he does it in the mirror so he can feel it. Then what you're going to have is a pitcher that understands what the feel is like. First, he's done the floor exercise to feel what pre-stretch really feels like. Then he gets the movement, and you direct him that make sure when you're doing this that you're feeling your shoulder blades are helping you keep that arm back. And that's how you begin to teach a pitcher feel. Now, I just want to warn you, if a pitcher's got an arm that moves up and down in acceleration, he doesn't stay on the equal plane. He's moving his body up and down as he's turning, as he starts to keep his arm level, going from that position we saw, we'll call it the pre-max external rotation position. When you go from there to max external and then you deliver, if you're doing it right, you're going to be on a nice level plane. If you're doing it wrong, and you're usually doing it wrong, lifting your elbow, lifting your arm, you're going to have a release point that actually is better, but it's going to be different from what you're used to. So by correcting your rotation to give yourself more efficiency, if it's not what you're doing, give yourself a minute to, not have the ball do what you want it to do, because you've got to learn to be consistent with the body. Does that make sense, Larry?
Yeah, this is great. I think it's a really good drill for just exactly what you said. I mean, for someone that hasn't felt what it's like to rotate and feel their arms stay back, and it does create, when you do it right, when you do it, it does feel like it's at the end of a whip. It does feel effortless. It does feel it's not a ton of work. You're not laboring to do it. Your arm's in a good spot, and as you rotate the turn, it feels great. And what a great way to teach it, and what a great way for, I think, young kids to feel what it's like to do this, to turn, to throw the ball properly. It's sometimes less is more. I mean, it's not a lot of movement. It's pretty. You're in a good spot. You rotate. And you're in a good spot to throw the ball. This is great.
Yes. And actually, I say something to my pitchers, and when they get it, and they go, "Oh, I got it." And it may be that I've been saying it for 4 months. For me, I had to learn the pitching motion as somebody who never pitched. I was approaching this strictly as a scientist, a student who was using the language of kinesiology to know exactly what to do. Because if I told 30 kinesiologists, take your right arm, go to 90 degrees of abduction, go to X degrees of internal rotation, they would have their right arm looking exactly like you see right here in this photo, because we have language that's specific. So that's how I learned. And then, of course, I learned more and more working with pitchers. But to me, this is how it felt. You get your arm up like this, and you leave your arm right there. You leave it there, and you turn your body and you turn your shoulder, but you're leaving your arm in the same place. That's how I learned it. And actually, that's really what's happening. It's like the arm's staying there, the body's turning around it as the arm bone is just rotating backwards. When my pitchers get that, you can't say that to a 9-year-old or someone whose brain isn't developed, but when you get a 19, 20, 21-year-old and you say, and in fact, when you're doing the drill and you're holding the arm and he's turning, he'll get a sense of that. And you will too. You're standing there rotating his arm. You're not moving. His arm's just rotating externally. His body is rotating around the arm. And I know that sounds crazy. And for all you listeners who are going, what is she talking about now? There will be a day when if you do this, you're going to go, oh, I get it. And I'll tell you, that's the simplicity. I always say pitching is you're standing sideways, you step out, you turn, and you throw. It's as simple as that. And that
Simply
is
put, yeah.
exactly. Well, that's what happens when you haven't done it yourself, and really and truly in analysis and in science, we keep things simple because it is simple because the joints are doing very specific things, and you have to actually be able to identify it, and it's not so easy to learn that, but once you learn it, you realize, wow, this is simple. So anyway, so Larry, do you have any questions about anything I've said here?
No, this is a good topic. You were pretty thorough, and I thought it was great. And the last little drill here is pretty profound. It's pretty really simple, really basic, but boy, there's a ton of value in it. So I think it's good info, great info.
Yeah, and I think when you're in season, if things are going wrong, but you need them to go right, you have to be able to make adjustments or to think about your mechanics. One thing I want to say to pitchers that are listening, when I watch, a lot of baseball and baseball shows, so I hear a lot about hitting. And I'm very intrigued by hitting because it's very similar to pitching in so many ways. But one of the things I noticed, Larry, and tell me if I'm right, hitters are always working on their mechanics. If they feel they're under the ball or they're not doing this or not doing that, they are always working on their mechanics, never afraid to work on their mechanics. In fact, they work on mechanics all the time. And it doesn't matter if they're in season or if it's before a game, they're working on mechanics. In fact, I remember one announcer saying, you got to give up the video at some point because you can go crazy looking at it. To hitters, he was speaking. But I was thinking to myself, why are hitters more brave than pitchers to look at their mechanics? And I said, I don't know if it's because maybe there seems to be a lot of information out there about hitting, sometimes more than pitching, in terms of what actually happens. And I don't know if that's the reason. I'm not sure what the reason is, but I feel like pitchers should not be afraid to work on their mechanics. If something's not right, if they're not getting outs, your favorite word, if they're not getting outs, and this is a consistent problem. I'm not talking about obsessing over one walk you gave up. I'm talking about 3, 4 outings in a row. Something's wrong. You're not getting outs, or you don't feel right. Something's wrong. To not be afraid to take a look and in between starts, work on maybe just one little tiny thing that is not right. And I think that pitchers have a tendency to not be as aggressive with making adjustments as hitters are. And they're both in the same position in the game in the sense that it's the pitcher and the hitter, and that's what's going to create the next thing. So I would like to encourage pitchers to be a little more brave about taking a look at something when something isn't working and engage the coaches in a discussion about it. Go to your pitching coach. But do you agree with me on that, Larry?
Oh yes, absolutely. Hitters take batting practice or hit off if they do something in relation to the swing every day, and pitcher, I would encourage them to throw every day as often as they can. Every day. Once we throw every day, and so and that's your batting. It's a pitcher's batting practice. That's an opportunity for you to work on many things, work on delivery issues, reinforcing, things are, and you don't just do them when, just dive in when things are going bad. You do these things every day to hopefully, if you're pitching well and commanding the ball and getting positive results, keep doing it to reinforce what you're doing well, so it's huge. It's really important. And it's really important to pay attention to what you're doing when you're throwing the ball to do something, I think, delivery related, to throwing the ball every day. I think it's important.
Exactly. And I think that pitchers need to use their flat ground throwing as a way to practice things. They don't obviously a pitcher can't get on the mound. He can use downhill with a catcher up. He can work at 45 feet down a mound in between, but he can't really be pitching all the time. However, there are certain things that you can do when you're playing catch, particularly this kind of issue of making sure that your body arrives before your arm. And I think that it should be used wisely. Pitchers need to use every minute they have a ball in their hand wisely. It should not just be throw the ball and then you throw one way and then you pitch another way. They should always be working on their mechanics, but I mostly want to encourage them to be brave enough to do it, because the gift you have doesn't go away that easily.